Welcome back, folks. Yesterday, Armor Warfare developers released a video about their ammo types within the game, and since nothing else is going on, let's take a look at this video together, and I'll make some live critique, reviews, and questions that you might want to think about while we're watching. So here we go. Here we go. We'll watch it on YouTube because better resolution and captions.
The entire history of armored warfare is marked by the struggle between offense and defense. Tank developers were always trying to create vehicles that were as well protected as possible, while building means with which to defeat the competition that was attempting to do the same thing. The first tanks were rather rudimentary, boxes of iron and steel designed to fight enemy infantry rather than each other. Their guns firing simple explosive rounds or even solid steel shots. It was only 2 decades later, during the Spanish Civil War, when the importance of tank versus tank combat was really demonstrated, and the race to create the best weapon and the best armor started in earnest. Soon, new types of guns and ammunition were developed, and the Leviathans of old made way for sleek war machines with sloped armor. But at the end of the war, the armor was still mostly made of steel. Even with the greatest conflict of human history over, the race never stopped, and it continues to this day. Steel was replaced by aluminum and alloys, and soon after, composite armor was born to defeat the latest types of shells and missiles. We are going to find out exactly how this evolution is represented in armored warfare.
Okay, he mentioned and emphasized composite armor. So that's very important because it's modern day technology. But he forgot to mention reactive armor, which is also important too. So, is there going to be reactive armor within the game? Hopefully, food for thought.
Armored warfare features armored fighting vehicles dating all the way back to post-World War II, up to the modern-day vehicles that you'll see around the world today. So it does feature vehicles from the Korean War era, the Cold War era, as well as more recent conflicts that have happened in the last couple of decades. One of the things that we really wanted to represent in armored warfare was the way that technology has evolved in armored conflict. So there was this back and forth race to evolve ammunition to be better at penetrating different types of armor. And then armor evolved to defend against different types of ammunition. And that back and forth cycle has really gone on ever since armored fighting vehicles were invented. And then we want to reflect that in the game. And so we have the different types of ammunition that have been invented, represented, available for the different vehicles that were able to use it.
Let's take a look at his ammo choices. So, where the hell is that? Alright, so we have AP, the armor piercing discarding sabot, armor piercing fin stabilized discarding sabot, so AP shells, the HEP, which is the high explosive plastic, the heat shells, which is the high explosive anti-tank. So HEP is like HESH and considered as normal high explosive, I guess. Alright, so we have different types of these shells, and there's more than one in each category. So you have 7 different types of shells. Alright, but looks like the AP shells goes up in penetration as well as the damage. So there's no flux between the different type of shells with different types of AP. Like you might have a lower penetrating AP shell, but does more damage. So there's no flux. It's just the constant curve. Alright, so if you have the last shell, the previous 2 are kind of obsolete. So if you already have the last M735A1 shell, yeah, the 2 before it is kind of obsolete. So, alright. And the credit difference between these is not that much. So if you're going to have the last AP shell, that shell might cost like twice as much as the first one. That would be an interesting choice because you're paying double the price for a little bit more penetration. So, alright. But yeah, the high explosive plastic looks like less penetration, which is expected, but less damage too. Yeah, the damage is not the same as the AP shell. At least like half. What the frick? Alright. The high explosive anti-tank has a little bit more penetration than the high explosive plastic, but deals more damage. less penetration against the AP, which is normal because it's fin stabilized, discarding sabots. It's not the derpy AP shells they used during World War II, so it's not the derpy shell with the charge behind it. So yeah, it's more fancy. But yeah, these shells all use credits, which is good. So it comes from the little brick shape thing instead of the little cylinder shape thing. So this is gold. So these all use the brick, which is the normal credits, I presume. So that's good. But yeah, kind of pointless to have shells before it, costing relatively the same. So 18 credits is not that much. But yeah, kind of pointless to have shells before it if they're going to have more less penetration and less damage. So the credit factor should be like doubled between these two shells. That will make a big difference of choosing which shells to use. But for now, okay, food for thought. Food for thought.
The ammunition that have been invented, represented, available for the different vehicles that were able to use it. So the three primary types of ammunition out there that can be broken down into is the armor-penetrating shells, or kinetic penetrators, shape charges, also referred to quite often as heat, and the high-explosive shells, which are often abbreviated as HE. Each one of these different shells has a different strength and weakness, and we wanted to represent that in the game.
So each one of these is going to be useful in a particular situation and will be better or worse against different kinds of armor. So what armor or what ammunition a player chooses to use is going to be highly dependent on the situation. Armor-penetrating rounds, the kinetic penetrators, these are basically just big metal arrows. And the idea is that these things travel extremely quickly, and all of their penetration potential comes from mass of the projectile and the velocity of the projectile.
So for example, the armor-piercing shells have very high precision penetration factor against almost all types of armor, but they're not going to do the highest level of potential damage. Heat shells, on the other hand, have very high penetration against most types of armor, but there's also way more countermeasures available against that type of shell, which we'll talk about further on. Probably a good way to compare some of the broad categories of ammunition is if you think about the high-precision sniper rifle rounds from, say, a Barrett 50 caliber. In that case, your shell is going to have a very high muzzle velocity, and it's going to have very high precise precision penetration at the point of impact. So that has the advantages of very short travel time, making it easier to get a moving target, as well as having very little that can defend against it because it's just a straight shot that's going to penetrate.
So armor piercing is the same as armor piercing in World of Tanks. Simple enough, right? Okay.
The high explosive shells are really good at splash damage, dealing damage over a radius rather than having to hit their targets directly, but they also suffer the lowest penetration, so very thick armor defends quite well against high explosives.
It's the only type of ammunition that can deal an indirect hit to a vehicle, so even if you miss the target, the area of effect may be large enough to deal some damage, and it's also very useful against targets that are very lightly armored. If you can penetrate a target and get your ammunition inside their vehicle, it'll create an explosion inside their vehicle and deal devastating damage to the target.
On the other hand, you have probably something closer to, like maybe a grenade launcher would be a little bit closer to a high explosive shell. So you have slower travel time, you're going to lob that shot over a distance, and then it's going to explode at the point of impact. So the disadvantage there is of course, you have the slower shell velocity, so a little bit harder to hit a moving target. But you have the advantage of that splash at the end of the impact, so it can actually hit in a wider radius and hit something that maybe you didn't hit quite directly.
Okay, so from World of Tanks, high explosive is not used as much, I guess, because it's high explosive. You really want to penetrate and deal the maximum damage. So usually a lot of players just carry like 1 or 2 or 3 high explosive shots, and that's pretty much it. But if we can destroy buildings and destroy objects like a small trailer home, high explosive is more effective because it blows the whole thing up, whereas AP shell just creates a hole. So is there the utilization of destructible objects where high explosive is more important? So do we have that? I don't know yet, but I don't know if they know yet, but yeah, high explosive is not used as much against normal tanks because sometimes you could hit the tracks and the tracks act like space armor. So there goes your 500 damage. So that's only like 100 damage. So that sucks. But if we're going to have destructible objects, high explosive will be actually worthwhile to carry in your tank for now, it doesn't do that much. Food for thought.
Shape charge ammunition is a little bit different from AP. The idea is that the projectile itself isn't actually doing the penetration. When it hits armor or something on the path, it actually detonates and creates a stream of metal particles that are sent into the armor to do the penetration in real life. In Armored Warfare, the way that we simulate that is that the projectile doesn't lose any penetration potential with distance. So until it hits something, it has all of its penetration potential. Once the projectile hits something, at that point, then the stream is created, and we do a ray trace into the vehicle. And the further the distance that the stream has to travel to hit the base armor, the more penetration potential it loses on the way. So the idea is that even though it doesn't have as high of a penetration potential as a kinetic penetrator, it also has no loss of penetration at distance, and it's very, very damaging once it actually manages to get inside of a vehicle. So compared to a normal AP round, the shape charge rounds are going to deal a lot more damage when they actually manage to penetrate. In addition to that, most of the ATGMs that we have in the game, which are the guided missiles, are using the shape charge hit resolution model.
Okay, so high explosive anti-tank is the same as high explosive anti-tank within the game for World of Tanks, but that's less penetration than the normal AP shells because derpy AP shells. It's not the fin stabilized, fancy discarding sabots. All right, so less penetration, more damage. That's a trade-off, but not as much as the high explosive. All right.
Anti-tank guided missiles use a shaped charge, so they fall into the same category as high explosive anti-tank ammunition, at least typically. The special thing with missiles is that you can manually guide them using your mouse. So even after you've fired it, if your target is moving or that sort of thing, you can try to move your missile in order to follow the target and hit them in a weak spot. You can also do some trick shots with that, like trying to guide your missile around a corner or sending it up into the air and then back down to hit a very unarmored part of the top of a vehicle. There are also things called thermobaric anti-tank guided missiles, which are very special rounds that function like high explosive rounds. You still guide them with your mouse, just like other missiles, but they explode in an area of effect, similar to high explosive rounds.
They require a little bit more skill than maybe that seems like because they move a lot slower than the regular projectiles do. So it takes a while for them to get to their target, and they also are not going to be extremely maneuverable. So if an enemy vehicle manages to get into cover, or if they're very quick, it's going to be hard to hit them with one of those guided missiles. That is a major disadvantage of using ATGMs. Even though they are going to be extremely powerful, you're exposed the whole time that thing is in the air. Now, you could try to drive and guide it at the same time, but I think that what most players are going to find is that's almost impossible.
So two interesting things about that clip. It's that most anti-tank guided missiles act like high explosive anti-tank shells. Does that mean you'll bounce if you hit a target with a missile? Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's way too sucky. So if it behaves like normal high explosive anti-tank, it will bounce if you hit like a slope armor or composite armor. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That just boggles the brain for a second. Okay, that sucks. Also, there's thermobaric, like he mentioned, which is high explosive shots with your missiles. So that's good. So it blows up like a normal missile would. And that's probably the type I'll be using. So yeah, if there's bouncing with the missiles, that's just disappointing. Also, what is interesting is that you have to guide the missiles with your mouse. So you have to keep your mouse pointer onto some targets and lead the shot or guide the missiles as it travels through space or through the air and hit the target. But it's mostly wire guided or laser guided mechanism in real life. It's not heat seeking or just fire and forget. All right, so it's not the I log onto your tank, I fire the missile does whatever it wants, I do whatever I want, and just you explode. It's not that. That would be way too OP. So you could trick the system. I'm thinking about it. So could you trick the system by auto-aiming onto a target and fire the missile and just forget? Still, you have to keep your turret pointed towards the target, but that's like automatically heat-seeking, I guess? I don't know, but yeah, there's a lack of the fire and forget type of missile, like a javelin. So, whoopee. Ugh.
As you can see, the commander of any vehicle in armored warfare has a fearsome arsenal at his disposal. But there are ways to mitigate the impact of some shells with armor and additional equipment. We will talk about that in the next part of our developer diary. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.
I probably will, but alright, so he mentioned that they're going to talk about armor next, which is very important because they only mentioned the difference between normal, standard, homogeneous block of steel, which is the armor in World of Tanks, against composite armor. But there's also reactive armor. So hopefully there's going to be reactive armor in this game. Now there's also the mesh armor. So where's the clip of the BMD, whatever. What the hell is it? Or a BMP. It looks like a BMP from the front. There it is. So you can see that this is mesh armor or grating. What this does is protect you against anti-tank guided missiles. So this basically knocks off the missiles and the missiles explode outside the tank, deal minimal damage, if any at all. So this is the mesh armor. Now it is like the Panzer IV small term within World of Tanks, but that tank is special because the mesh armor doesn't act like space armor, doesn't act like a mesh, so there's nothing there. So it's only cosmetic. Hopefully within this game, this grating is actually used against high explosive anti-tank guided missiles. So hopefully, but yeah, looking forward to the armor explanation coming up next. So for now, they talk about reactive armor. Oh, no, they didn't talk about reactive armor. They talk about the composite armor, which is used against high explosive anti-tank, but they did not mention reactive armor. So you might want to think about the mesh armor right here, as well as the reactive armor. So food for thought, food for thought. Now, they do have incendiary rounds from previous clips I saw. So there are incendiary rounds that catch people on fire. But I'm looking forward to the tungsten rounds, which is like a shotgun shell. So what that would do is blow away cover most of the time, or buildings. That will use the tungsten round, like a gigantic shotgun shell, against buildings to destroy a building, demolition purposes. It's more effective against like concrete, where high explosive doesn't destroy it automatically. So if there's going to be destruction of buildings and environments, tungsten round is kind of important because you blow away buildings easier than high explosive. So yeah, there are different types of shells, but for now, the primary shells are AP, high explosive anti-tank, and high explosive, which is the normal standard for World of Tanks. All right, it's not that new. Still not interested that much. It's not fancy enough, just to put it. But hope you guys enjoyed this video. A little bit food for thought, critiquing. So yeah, the mechanism is simple enough. So familiar, that's good. But I was looking for the tungsten shell and blowing away cover and blowing away a building, for example. But whoop. I mean, he should have mentioned that we still have special shells like incendiary or something else like that, but oh well. But thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel for more armor warfare stuff, as well as World of Tanks. And leave a comment below on what you think about the shells within armor warfare. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.